being a locally owned little business, supporting the local community, that personalized level of care, like each person in my chair is an individual, and I really try to do what's going to work best for them. And I think patients see that and they can understand that. So you don't feel like you're going above and beyond, but when
Mm.
you're caring for that person and their individual needs, it often correlates with that.
Welcome to The Focused View, the podcast for eye care professionals across Australia. Brought to you by Opticare. In each episode, we bring together leading eye care, optical and business professionals to share valuable insights, practical tips, and the latest trends shaping the optical business landscape. I'm your host, Michael Nasser, and together we'll explore innovative strategies for practice growth, patient care, and business success in the eye care industry. Whether you're starting your career, managing a practice, or just looking to stay ahead of the field, The Focused View is your source for inspiration and knowledge.
Amanda, thanks for joining the show today.
Thanks for having me.
I guess for the purposes of the audience, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and I guess how you got started in optometry?
Yeah, definitely. So as Mike said, I'm Amanda Duffy. I am an optometrist based in Newcastle, Lake Macquarie region. My husband and I, we own two practices. We own Eyecare plus Belmont and Eyecare plus Edgeworth. I'm 28 years old. I grew up in Gunnedah, in country New South Wales, and my dad is also an optometrist. His name is Tim. He had a couple practices as well, so I grew up in his practices, but lived a very classic country life, growing up on the farm, running around, being a kid.
You mentioned growing up in your dad's practice, and obviously I've got a little bit of a connection there because, I'm not an optometrist, but dad's is an optom. And so I've been part of that journey. So I guess I can understand what that's like. But again, you mentioned for yourself, you grew up in your dad's practice. What kind of influence did that have on you, I guess, and in your ultimate career path?
Yeah, definitely. So when I was finishing school, I enjoyed science. I enjoyed working with people. So I knew I wanted to go into the health space. And I was obviously a big part of my childhood was in my dad's practice, whether it was helping out with the frames or, being in and out. So I really got to see what an independent optometry practice was like. So I looked at other areas as well. I looking at occupational therapy or even podiatry at some points. But when I got down to it, I looked at optometry. It just looked like a really good option for me. It had that medical component, but it also had science and it seemed like it was going to challenge me. So working in my dad's practice when I was younger, but also just being around, really probably big impact on my end decision to do optometry.
And in your current scenario, obviously, you've got an ownership with regards to what you do. You're the business owner as well as the principal optometrist. Was ownership something that was always planned on, or did it evolve over time? And I guess, how did that ownership piece come together for yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I guess for me, I never put too much pressure on myself early on. I think, I knew it was an option. Obviously, I saw my dad do it, but it wasn't like I'm going to do optometry and I'm going to own my own practice. It came as time went on. I kind of realized, I wanted to work in the independent space, and I knew that there would be opportunities to either buy in or purchase practices. So I knew that that was an option for me. I wanted to make sure I enjoyed optometry. So the first little while, I just focused on being a good optometrist. And then as time grew and I felt I wanted a little bit more from my career, I decided, and talking my husband as well, he's very business driven, which is excellent, but definitely the thought of being my own boss, being able to run things and provide patient care as I see as a good level, it soon became a realization for me that owning a practice was going to be the way for me to do that.
And ownership in the industry obviously can come about in multiple ways. You've mentioned a few times the word independent. Did you always know that that was the path that you were going to go down? And if so, what drew you to that independent path as opposed to, say, ownership in another context?
I guess my dad's practices were independent, and I could pretend that wasn't a big influence, but it was. I think as well, having that flexibility to, be a part of the community and do things as I see fit. I didn't ever feel that I wanted to be pressured to be practicing a certain way. I knew that I wanted to prioritize the patient in my chair, and I just felt from my experience through the independent pathway, that was the best way to do it. I just thought perhaps other avenues of ownership just put a bit too much pressure on me to be practicing how they expect, or so I decided that, independent was the better for me.
Yeah. And you mentioned there about the patient experience. And again, we're not speaking about any other type, but from your experience and from what you've seen, when you tie up independence with the way that you view it, and something that we've mentioned in the past is, that quality in the practice and the quality you like to bring. Can you speak to how independence and the independent path has allowed you to provide that quality? And can you speak to that quality of patient care that, I know is so prevalent in your practice?
So I think, as I kind of mentioned before, often in the independent world, the business owners, the people who work in the business, they all live locally. And so you're a big part of the local community. So that is a big driving force. You really want to be providing your friends, your family, your fellow suburb people, a really high quality of service. And so for us, that's a really big thing. Our team, we see ourselves as a family, and looking after our team is so important so that our team are in a good position to then give the patients coming in a really good quality service. And what that means for me is from the moment that they pick up the phone to make the phone call, from when they walk in, they get greeted, they get a friendly face, a smile, bit of a laugh, and throughout the whole process. So once they get pre-tested in the room with the optometrist, just really looking after the individual and just ensuring that you address their primary concerns, you educate them about their eyes and about the decisions that you think would work well for them. And as I say to the patients, look, this is what I think would be the best option for you. But I always give it back to them that it's your decision. Okay. I'm not forcing you into anything. They're your eyes. But as your practitioner, I would recommend that this would be the best quality for blah, blah, blah. So I think it's all about the products that we provide, the service, and also the technology that we use as well.
And I guess a big part of that is the team. And obviously you've got a little bit of a vision there, or not a little bit, it's quite a vision with regards to, what you see your practice being. How do you ensure that your other team members on par with that? What sort of activities do you do to encourage, what you see, that should be done with regards to that patient experience, and ensuring the team also represents that as well?
Yeah. So I often say to our team when we have meetings that they are, at the end of the day, without them out, we don't have a business. And so they are incredibly important to us. The patients are very important, but our team, if we didn't have them, we wouldn't have a business. So we really try to let them know that we're here to support them. We do monthly meetings with our team. We're regularly touching base with them, seeing how they're going. Is there anything that we can do to help? Is there any, if you need some time off or if you need, so we really try to support them. We also try to do some social events. So we try, once a quarter to go out for dinner together, or, do some bowls and then dinner, or things like that, which just brings us together, celebrating birthdays, really trying to create that sense of a work family. So they feel very comfortable. They feel happy to be working. And then I think that shows so clearly to the patient. The patient can tell when someone wants to be there and looks after them.
And what are the main differences that you notice with regards to the care that, is provided in your practice versus what is often seen in the more corporate settings? And again, it's not to say one's better than the other, to be honest. It's not for us, but there is a difference there. And what are those differences that you see, whether it's through colleagues or whether it's through experience you've had yourself with regards to, those two, I guess, settings and scenarios?
Yeah. So as you kind of mentioned, I've never worked in a corporate setting, so I can't speak for my own experience. I guess talking to patients, a lot of our patients just say, I've never had anyone explain that to me, or I've never had an eye test as thorough as this, or thank you for the time you've taken to look after myself, my mother, whoever it might be. So I really think it comes back to, being a locally owned little business, supporting the local community, that personalized level of care. Like each person in my chair is an individual, and I really try to do what's going to work best for them. And I think patients see that and they can understand that. So you don't feel like you're going above and beyond, but when you're caring for that person and their individual needs, it often correlates with that. And as I said, a big part of that as well is coming back to the team, is our team are happy to be at work. They're a happy, friendly face. And that is so welcoming for patients. It puts them at ease. It just makes that whole process a lot easier and a lot more comfortable.
And I think something that you'd mentioned earlier, if I speak to it briefly, is a pressure. You said the reason why I think you chose the path that you wanted to do is because you could put the pressure on, I guess, in the way that you wanted to. And you mentioned education, for example, and obviously educating your patient is a main priority, and giving them options. And perhaps obviously an independent environment perhaps allows you to really put the pressure on parts of the business that you would like to focus on. And
Yeah.
it may not necessarily be a sale driven pressure, but it's more of a pressure of educating and patient care. And obviously in turn, the sales eventually come as a result of that, but it's not obviously the pressure that you're putting on yourself or your team members at first instance. Would I be right to say something
Yeah,
like that?
definitely. There's no KPIs. It's not, you have to be
Mm,
meeting these standards. It's each patient needs a different type of consultation, and you tailor it to them, and you offer
yeah.
them products that, if you think that's going to make their lives easier and support them and improve their quality of life. But there's no hard and fast rule that you have to be practicing like this. It's really dependent on the patient in your chair.
Yeah. And I guess that's really also more evident in a local community. And just for the purposes of the audience, how big is the area with regards to where the practice is based from a population point of view?
It's a good question. So we are based, I guess, in the Newcastle area. So there are
Right.
quite a few optometrists around. Our Belmont practice, I think Newcastle has a population, let's say 500,000, I'm going to guess.
Right.
So it's a big area, and Lake
Mm,
Macquarie's, but it's because it's spread out, we're on the lake more so. You do still get these pockets of community, but it's hard to
yeah.
put an exact number on the numbers there.
No, fair enough. So I guess if we sort of change the tune a little bit, man, I think a lot of what you've spoken about there is that independent advantage and the I guess that advantage that you can get by being independent and really setting your path in that regard. But in your case, we also have spoken about ownership, and I want to sort of delve a little bit deeper into that. If I'm not mistaken, you purchased your first practice. What was that experience like, and what challenges did you face, and how did you overcome them as well?
Yeah, I guess it's like anything, if it's the unknown, it's scary, right? It's like, where do you even start? So it's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of thinking and considering. And then, once you kind of, what, I want to give it a go. I want to see if maybe being a practice owner or partner in a practice is something that I want to explore. It's reaching out. So that is the first and the hardest step is, putting yourself out there and reaching out to possible independent optometrists in the area who may be interested. And you don't know, okay, just because someone's in their 40s and you think, oh, they've got a great career ahead of them, you don't know the individual circumstance. So definitely that initial step, and it could just be in a form of a letter or an email or even a phone call. That is obviously the first hurdle. The other, I guess, the challenges with buying a practice is, once you do find a practice that might be eligible, you then look at getting it all drawn up, looking at costs, and that, involves accountants and solicitors, and it makes you really feel like you're being an adult, big person, because, we don't deal with them every day today. So it's a little bit daunting, but all those professionals there are actually there to help you and make your decision and job easier. So that could be a little bit daunting dealing with those professionals, but at the end of the day, their job is to make it easier for you.
How did you have the confidence or the know-how because again, a lot of the things that we're speaking about there, I guess, do seem quite simple in nature, but the confidence, I guess, that you have with regards to getting out there and sending a letter or how did that shape in your mind? And I guess at what point did you make the decision that it was something you were going to do? And what were the tools that you used for yourself that enabled you to actually make those first steps? Because it is quite daunting, and especially, if you're a younger optom and you see this as a path and, there's a lot of different professionals you've got to speak to. Did you have support, and what did that look like? And I guess, can you speak more to those initial hesitations that you had?
So I guess I started practicing as an optometrist. I was enjoying it. I was working in an independent practice, but I kind of probably got 6 months one and I just felt I needed more. I was starting to feel a little bit mundane. It just wasn't satisfying as much as it was initially. And I just thought, how can I get more satisfaction out of my career? And as I mentioned, in my case, obviously my husband was very happy to be involved and supportive. So, it started out, talking to the independent optometrist I was working for at the time, seeing where he was at, whether he was interested. We looked into that option, and then, other opportunities came up. I started working a bit part-time for another optometrist and just chit-chatted to him, and they were a little bit more keen, a little bit more interested. So it is tricky, so that was our first practice, was kind of talking to the optometrist that I was working with. When it came to our second practice, because I was already tied up in our own practice, it was different. I hadn't worked at these practices before, but we were reaching out to people and they're so receptive. People are really, you think that they're not interested, but I know now that the shoe's on the other foot. For example, as a practice owner, if someone approaches you, and if I was at the point that I was considering slowing down, you're very interested in what they have to say, because it's, there is a lot of optometrists in this day and age who are potentially looking at slowing down and retiring in the next few years.
Yeah. And we'll definitely speak to those opportunities going forward. Something I want to pick up on there is you mentioned your husband was a big part in all of this, and you mentioned him a few times. I'm running 2 practices with him now. What's that dynamic like?
Yeah. Oh, challenging at times. No, it works really well for us. So my husband's not an optometrist. His name is James. He is an engineer / project manager by trade. So he has always been interested in business, and that's worked really well for us, because I'm testing 4 days a week. I'm in the store a lot of the time. I do, play a role in staff and stock management and just the general day-to-day run of things. My husband, he focuses more on HR, so dealing with the staffing, the rostering. He does the marketing, more the finance side, as well as kind of IT and equipment. So we work really well together because we're working together, but kind of in different aspects, which is great for us. And I'm lucky that I've got his support, and he's interested and keen and a big part of it as well. I think for people who don't necessarily have a partner who's interested, going into partnerships and sharing that load, whether you have another optometrist, friend that who's switched on, who's clever, who wants a bit more out of the career, or even, coming into a practice with another optometrist who already owns it, and doing that part ownership component.
Yeah, I think, that partnership, and again, we'll probably speak to that a little bit later, but the power of that is really important. And I think the opportunity that can present is also quite dynamic if it's harnessed really well. And it sounds like you've got the perfect combination there with James with regards to the different parts of the business. As you touched on earlier, one of the things that drew optometry is the fact that it is an industry that it's clinical, obviously, and you're that clinical provider, and there is that patient care component, but there is also a fully fledged business part of our industry. And that's where you've got to really bring the two of those in together. And whether that's, with staff or with stock management and the marketing and all those other things, I feel like what you've described there really is that perfect combination of clinical care and business acumen that's put together to facilitate the path that you're on. And do you have any tips for working with, because in independence and, with small businesses, there are a lot of husband and wife combinations. Are there any tips that you've had with regards to the last couple of years that you could share, or, something that's helped you guys along the way when times have gotten tough, or avoiding those tough times altogether?
Obviously, it's a classic old one, by communicating, making sure you have the time to set and look at, setting what your goals are, looking at, the future, which is scary to do. And it's something that James and I really had to work on, I guess, is, okay, let's look at the big picture. What's our goals for the next 10 years, which is scary, but we did it, and we're okay. So let's see what would we like to achieve in the next 5 years. And also we set out a very clear mission statement as well, which seems, I know a lot of big corporate companies do it, but it's so important for smaller practices to do it as well, so that everyone knows what they're working towards. We all know as a business or as a practice, what our goals are, and then working to that and doing everything we can to achieve that. So having clear set goals as a practice is really important, because then everyone knows what we're striving towards. So that's been really helpful. It's been a big part of it, I'd say.
Yeah. What's one thing you wish more optometrists knew about becoming a practice owner now that you're obviously in that category? What would you say to people that are wishing or are hoping to become owners? What sort of advice would you impart on them?
I would just like to say how rewarding it is as being your own boss, and seeing a practice function the way that you envision, vision care to be. I think it is so rewarding, and am so satisfied in the career because I've been able to practice the way I like to practice. but also I have a team behind me who I love and support, and they support me and I support them. And it's hard work. Like, it's not easy. I'm not going to pretend that I haven't, spent many of hours on it, but it is so rewarding, and you just have such, satisfaction in what you're doing.
Mm. Changing tunes a little bit. We've spoken briefly about the opportunities in the industry. I guess we're at a point now where there is a little bit of a generational shift that's probably occurring, and there are a lot of beneficiaries for that. But you yourself have identified an opportunity, and you've gone out and spoken to people and made things happen. What would you say to optoms, of your generation with regards to the opportunity that currently presents from what you've seen? And I guess, how would you speak to a new grad who's curious but hesitant about all this sort of stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. As you say, like, I think there is a real generation shift at the moment where there are a lot of people who maybe started their practices 30, 40, even 20 years ago, and are just looking to slow down or retire or just, ease their workload. So we found from our experience in our area that, when we started reaching out, there was quite a few people that were interested. So that's a great opportunity there. I just think that, the hesitation, obviously, you're putting yourself in line, you're reaching out to someone you've never met before. Are they going to judge you? I can definitely understand that hesitation, but it's so important. Like, you just reach out, if you're too scared to do it on the phone, you send an email, or you just start something, or print out, as I said, a flyer and take it around to some relevant stores. For us, for example, at the end, I think we ended up looking at 6 different practices, and we ended up landing 2 of them. So it's hard, right? It's not going to be the first practice you walk into. It's going to be the one. Rejection is part of the process. And I think you grow so much during that. So, I think it's starting to ask the questions. It's, putting your big boy boots on or big girl boots on, and just reaching out and touching base. And the worst they can say is, no, I'm not interested. And then, you don't know unless you try.
Mm. Yeah. And I feel like, and again, I might be speaking out of turn here, but with regards to, grads coming through, and obviously this is probably more of a podcast sort of focused in on them, with people that are sort of considering this as a path. With the evolution of the industry in the last 15, 20 years, and I guess the major corporatization of it with regards to certain, players in the industry, in universities, there are probably a couple of really prominent voices where a lot of the grads end up going, not knowing exactly when you graduated, but speaking to when you did, and I guess the years after that, and maybe the years slightly before that. How have you seen a shift towards independence as a concept? And I guess then towards independent ownership, is it something that you think, people are more interested in? Are they purely, I guess, just consumed by the more corporate offer and I guess the ease of that? What are your thoughts on that? And I guess if you could speak to that, in any capacity.
Yeah, I think, definitely, as you say, when I graduated, the bigger corporates were very prominent. They made it very easy. They came to you essentially looking, for a job. So at first time, as people coming out of uni, a lot of my colleagues, well, not so much my colleagues, but my uni mates, they definitely looked, more to the corporate path because it was easier. But I have definitely felt a shift after they've been working for a couple of years.
Yeah.
There definitely seems to be a bit more disillusionment with the corporate setting, longer working hours, shorter consultation times, a push to meet KPIs, and people get sick of that, and people also get burnt out. I think when you're working really hard and you may not be getting rewarded for that, or you're not getting enough time off. So I find the general trend is, graduating, people, get a job that they can. And then after a couple of years of working in the workforce, realizing there's personal satisfaction as well as with your career. So I think that's when people start looking at the other options in the industry. I think people really like the idea of the independent space. It's just trying to get in, which can be challenging. Again, it's not just like reaching out to, some corporate's headquarters and saying, hey, looking for a job. It's, you have to reach out to each individual. So, if you're looking, for example, for me in Newcastle, you've got to look on a map and look at all the independent optometrists and reach out. So it's not as smooth, but I think, as you say, because of the disillusionment that's growing in the, sector of optometry, I think a lot of people are shifting more to the independent for that flexibility and better work environment.
I think the challenge for independence as a whole, I mean, everything you're sort of discussing there is really focusing in on the individual, which obviously I think is the case at some capacity, getting out there and finding that and looking for it. But also I think independents, in some type of way, probably need to work on probably advocating themselves within the university structures as an option. And maybe it is being done. I'm not necessarily very privy to all of that, but I think there is probably something to be said for the industry as a whole, sort of, pushing that independence. And especially, from the context as to which we come from, independence is a very, is obviously what we're passionate about. And it's not to say that the other areas aren't good, but I, like you, have that same sort of, appetite for independence and the appreciation for independence. And so I feel like, if there are younger optoms, the trick is, how do I do it? And then connecting them up. And, if you look at a cohort, there's probably only going to be a small percentage that are interested in it. It's not for everyone, but it's like, of those people that are interested, what are their next steps and how are they approaching things? And I think that there's something to be had there. So I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that. And it's probably something that, it's not spoken about very much in comparison to the other things that you hear.
Definitely. I know when I was graduating, I definitely had to do legwork. I knew I reached out, the classic, which I've been talking about the whole time, is when I was graduating, I reached out to independent optometrists, specifically specific stores, because that's the only way. I didn't see any other kind of support in that area. I have spoken to people about this, and it's very challenging because, hiring optometrists as a small practice is a big thing. And so they have to be in the right space and right time. So it would be perfect if there was an organization of some sort that was, their role was to go around to independents and, touch base each year, being like, look, there's grads coming out this year. Would you be willing to take a grad on, or would you be willing to share with another store? Like, just a little bit more communication in that area, but it's a really challenging space.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I guess that speaks to independence in large, right? I mean, I think the independent path is not the easy path.
No.
You mentioned that, the corporate path obviously is much easier. It's all mapped out for you. You just slot into the cog effectively and then off you go. Independence as a whole is a lot more challenging. And so I guess that's the case from the very outset. So it just speaks to the nature of the challenge.
Yeah. And that's why I think typically, and it definitely could change, but out of uni, people, just take a job where they can, but it's only after a couple of years they realize, what, my career is worth a lot more than just the easy option. I'm going to work a little bit harder to get that satisfaction, to get that drive, to be motivated to stay an optometrist for the next 20 years, So it's, as you say, initially the corporate side of things seems like the easier option, but as you get down your career, you soon realize that career satisfaction is so important. And that's when, you're willing to put in a little bit more effort, do a little bit more research, try a little bit harder because it pays off.
Absolutely. In my, talkings with you and everything that we've discussed now, and obviously when we just spoke to this, one thing that really stands out for me is your mindset, I think, and the way that you approach the challenge. And I think that's either something you've had naturally or something that you've worked on. But can you speak to the mindset with regards to what you think is important when someone's starting to consider ownership and independence? How important has your mindset been, and how have you approached, I guess, that really, I don't know if it's a buzzword or whatever it may be, but the really important aspect of all of this, which is how you think about it.
Yeah. It's, mindset is everything, right? In this day and age, it's easy to get down in the dumps, but a big thing when considering being optimistic and having courage. Like you don't have to know it all. You don't have to have the answers, but just giving it a go. It's so important. You don't know unless you try. And it doesn't have to be big and daunting to begin with. It's just a conversation. It's just starting those little tidbits, those little conversations, and just thinking, if this conversation goes well, it could lead somewhere. And, this could be changing the pathway of my career for the better. I think it is a bit daunting and it's a little bit scary, but change is hard, and challenging, but you grow from that. And so trying to be optimistic and have the courage to give it a go is so important.
And I guess speaking today, obviously having the success of acquiring the practices and running successful businesses, you probably got a confidence and a mindset from that. But early on, when you were first getting into it, what was your mindset like then? And how were your thoughts at that particular point in time? Probably dealing with so much unknown and I guess the difficulty of that. How did you cope with that? And I guess some people say, there's a bit of faking it till you're making it. Did you find yourself doing any of that? how did you handle those really initial moments from sending out those initial letters or having those initial discussions when it was all the idea and the thought and you
Yeah.
didn't have that confidence that you have,
Yeah.
say, now?
It's a great question. And look, I could say that it was easy and it was straightforward, but it wasn't. It is a hard thing buying practices. It was challenging. It really pushed me. Some days I felt better about it. And some days I felt really, it was a really hard thing. So for me, it kept coming back to, as an optometrist, as someone who's going to be providing care to the local community, I kept coming back to what are my beliefs and what do I want to achieve? And it's about providing a quality of care to those in my area. And so I kept coming back to that. And then, I looked at how can I achieve that? And it soon became pretty aware to me that it was through business ownership. And, and the other thing with business ownership is it's a business, right? I wouldn't be doing optometry or I wouldn't own an optometry practice if it wasn't, a successful business either. So, for my husband and I to give us the work-life balance that we want down the track, to work hard now, but to reap the rewards of a successful business, that was a big thing as well. But definitely, some days you don't have that confidence, but you have to trust your ability and what is your goal? What is your mission? And as long as you have an idea of where you want to be going, that definitely helps guide me and made it easier. But I had challenging
So,
days.
well, I was going to speak to that more if that's okay. When you speak about those really challenging days and probably thinking that the world's caving in and possibly, things aren't, what's happening here, what's happening there. And how have you handled that? I mean, you mentioned your long-term vision and, thinking about the bigger picture. Are they the things that sort of keep you powering through those really difficult moments? And as a business owner, have you felt isolated? Do you have that support network and how have you created that?
Yeah. I think a big thing is trying to keep perspective, which is sometimes it's really hard. You really get into the business and you're like, you know what? In a week's time, in a year's time, is this going to matter? Or how lucky am I to be in a position to be potentially buying a practice? You look at other people's lives and, people are unwell and, are going through a lot of struggles. And it's, you know what? I'm actually so grateful to have this opportunity. And yes, it's really hard. And yes, I'm stressed. But, so trying to step back, which is easier said than done, but that's a really important thing. It is challenging and some days are harder than others. And I guess as a business owner, it's been great. In my case, obviously I've got my husband, if you're in a partnership, you can lean on each other, but it is isolating in a way. It's a different type of pressure. If people haven't worked in the business, side of things, I guess it's hard for some people to understand. But it all comes down to the pressure you put on yourself and realizing that. And it's like, well, you know what? I'm doing my best. I just need to take the foot off the gas a little bit. I need to make this easier for myself and stop putting so much pressure. And that helps. But there's definitely, no one's perfect. I have days where you're not feeling great.
Yeah. I think that perspective component that you mentioned there is extremely powerful. And if you can reframe your perspective on things and master that, I think that can help a lot, especially when things are quite tough. And you've mentioned partnerships and partners, and you're very fortunate to have your husband, James, obviously, which has enabled you to achieve a lot in that regard. And for people that don't, that concept of having somebody there as a partner, especially if you're a young optom thinking about this particular model, could be really a path. I mean, I speak to friends in different verticals that have businesses, and I was speaking to someone yesterday actually, and they were saying they were really stressed. They've got two businesses. They've got one on their own and they've got one with a partner. It's the same business. He was mentioning to me, it's like, he goes, the business that has the partner in it is actually so much easier for me as opposed to the one that I've got to look out after myself because everything relies on me and I can't offload it. And it was, it was a bit timely because I knew I was having this discussion with you today and I know it's something we've discussed, but I think there's a hesitation with partnerships. And again, you're fortunate in where you've been able to position yourself with James, but to speak to, I guess, a younger optom or an optom that's considering this, how would you manage that partnership, I guess, conversation and that concept if it's something that is quite, I guess, foreign or something that, because again, some people are taught don't want partnerships because they make life more difficult.
It's, I guess the option is, okay, well, if you don't want to do a partnership, you're going to do it on your own. And as you say, like I personally, I don't think I could ever do it on my own. I think particularly as the practicing optometrist as well, you just don't have enough time in the day. You need that support. So if it has to come from somewhere. And so,
Mm.
you want to choose carefully. Like obviously you don't want to go in a partnership with anyone, but I know optometry is a small profession. We all kind of know each other. And I know there's a lot of friends within optometry and people who really well. So I guess it's a decision that you make with someone who may be like-minded or someone that you trust, and you trust what their values are. And you don't have to agree on everything, but as long as, again, your goals align and, what you want to achieve is the same, whether it be a successful practice, whether it be, that quality of care, staying aligned, having regular meetings, trying to keep the communication open, it is such an important part of a partnership. But if you're going to be the sole practicing optometrist, I don't know how you would have time to do
Yeah.
all the business as well.
Yeah. No, that's, well said. In reflection, speaking about what we're speaking about today, what has ownership given you personally and professionally that you probably wouldn't have found elsewhere?
Good question. So I guess I've touched on it a fair bit, but I feel very rewarded in the role that I play in the community. I feel a big sense of satisfaction and just I feel my role is incredibly important. So because of that, I think that sense, it gives me a lot of fulfillment, I guess you would say. I'm practicing in a way that aligns with my personal goals and my values. I think ownership as well, you get that flexibility, if I decide that I want an extra holiday here or there, I'm not stuck with my set weeks. Yeah, it's just that freedom and ability to practice how you envision.
Yeah. And you mentioned lifestyle earlier and work-life balance. And obviously it's something that you're taking a long-term view of. And, I guess that's another part of it too. You have control in that area and you can really create the life for yourself, which is a beauty of the industry with regards to where you see yourself. And you've obviously done that planning for 5 and 10 years down the track where you're working towards something. So it gives you that flexibility and that power, which is empowering in its own right.
Definitely. I think I don't live to work. I work to live, I guess I would say. And working quite hard at the moment, but I'm still going on holidays. I'm still getting away. Like lifestyle is incredibly important to me. I wouldn't consider myself a workaholic, but we've really had a look at where we want to be and how we can achieve that so that, down the track, if we have kids, I can be the netball coach or I can do the drop off and, it just have that flexibility is what we're really looking forward to.
Yeah. And I guess the strategic nature of how you've looked after all that and are working towards that is, I guess, really speaks highly to your abilities in that regard and is really inspirational, I think. And, even speaking to you today, it's like, why would you not be doing this? Like, it's almost like, it's possible, it can be done. And I feel like if people hear your message and can connect with you from time to time about things like this, it can only help. So I guess in that light, if someone's listening right now and wants to start exploring ownership for the first time, or it's something that they're thinking of, what would you have first recommendation for them? What's the first thing they should be doing?
So start looking in the area that you're living in or willing to live. One of my stores 45 minutes away from me. So it doesn't have to be your direct area. Sending that email, drop in a letter. It can seem daunting, but as I said, I know there are quite a few optometrists at the other end of their career who are either looking to retire or even looking for partnerships. That's definitely a big one. Even reaching out to Eyecare Plus or Provision, which are two big independent companies, and reaching out to see if they know anyone who's looking to sell. Definitely, it's just that first step of, taking that leap and just, as I said, the worst thing someone could say is they're not interested. And then,
Yeah, and that's a really powerful comment there. I think, going to industry bodies that exist, whether it's your Eyecare Pluses or your Provisions or perhaps Optometry Australia, or if you're an optometrist here specifically, I think, those institutions and businesses can really assist if that's something that you're interested in. OptiPro is another one that's sort of young and building up in that space as well. So there are networks already that do exist, and leveraging those and using those and not being afraid to get out there. And like you said, once people hear a question, they're generally pretty receptive to assisting in some capacity. So I think just get out there and do it is effectively what you're saying. Like just send them a message or make that initial point of communication. more broadly, like how do you see the independent model competing with the larger groups like, Specsavers or the Georgia Matildas, in the years ahead? Like, what's your vision with regards to independence as a model going forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, look, it can be challenging in a way. Like, I think um, a lot of retiring optometrists may be selling to, say, Georgia Matilda, but it often comes that either they haven't had other options. I
Mm,
know that in that space, there's a lot of, it's not so new anymore. You hear a lot of stories about people who have sold, and their experience of having to stay on and work for them is really challenging. So
yeah.
I guess it depends on, the older generation of optometrists, what their goals are and their motivation to keep independent optometry alive and
Yeah.
looking at other options. I think as well, though, post COVID, that sort of thing, a lot of people's mindsets sets have shifted, and supporting local is a really big thing. But also, as I said, that personalized care, as I say to, with a lot of my patients, I talk to them and you just kind of make them realize how important their vision actually is in their day to day, and how important it is to actually look after their eyes and make sure they have their regular eye tests and use quality products and that sort of thing. I think there's a huge, market for independent optometry because
Mm,
people want that consistent care. They want the same familiar faces, that happy environment when they walk in the door. I find in general, there's a lot less shifting and changing of staff, whether it be optometrists in front of staff in the independent world, and patients really value
yeah.
that continual care.
Mm. Yeah, and I guess it just speaks to the opportunity as a whole that does exist for any optom that wants to make the most of that. Finally, if someone wants to reach out to you or connect with you as we wrap up today, what's the best way that they can connect with you if they want to sort of, pick your brain on a few of the things, if it's okay for them to do so?
Definitely. No, more than happy for anyone to reach out. I would love that. So probably best to do it on LinkedIn. If you look up
Mhm.
Amanda Duffy and just send
Yep.
me a message, I will definitely get back to you guys. But yeah, any questions, I'm more than happy to answer and try to support people because it's something that's important and it's close to my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I got in the conversations that we've had. It's really something that you are passionate about and you're quite good at it. And I think that the trickiest part is that mindset and that ability of knowing that it can be done if you have the persistence and the drive and the will to do so. And sometimes it's just that connection. And to be fair, it's the very well as to why podcast exists, because if one person hears this, they then have an ability or a path to say, okay, now I know at least where I can go to make that next step if I'm so interested in it. And again, like I said, your story is so inspirational. And I think what I love about it is it can be repeated. It's not just yourself. It could be anyone that has that same drive and ambition as you do. So congratulations on everything you've achieved. Thanks for your time. And I guess if there are any final words, please share.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Michael. That is very kind of you to say those lovely things. Look, I would just say if you're interested, just give it a go. Just try, put the feelers out there. You don't know unless you try, and at the end, I'm just an ordinary woman, a 28-year-old
Mm,
woman. And I guess I've got career, I know where I want to go with my career and I've had to put hard work in, but I'm nothing special, I've just
mm,
worked hard to get where I've got.
mm,
And
mm.
I think a lot of people could do the same.
Yeah, no, I love that message. Thanks so much for your time, Amanda. It was awesome chatting today and really appreciate your insights. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks so much, Michael.
Stay connected by subscribing to The Focused View and visiting our website www.thefocusedview.com.au for additional resources and episode summaries. We look forward to your company again in our next episode. Until then, keep focused. I'm Michael Nasser. Bye for now.